North America, Human Characteristics, Part 1. All right, so when we talk about North America, we're talking about the United States and Canada. One thing that we need to keep in mind, and I think we've mentioned it before, is that both the United States and Canada, if you take a look at this graphic, what the picture illustrates is that we are a nation of immigrants. If you see everyone from all walks of life, everyone besides the Native Americans came here. So both the United States and Canada, or nations, were shaped by immigration. Also, if you recall from our the lecture on population growth, most of the population growth in the United States and Canada, in North America, is from immigration right now. It's not from the native population growing. It is from immigration. One of your homework questions that I want you guys to think about and ponder is to write in a complete sentence, why is our country so ethnically diverse? Please explain that. And it's right there in bolded letters in your notes, Scott. Also, bringing it home a little bit. What cultures have been mixed here in Louisiana? So you guys have been, you guys should have a good idea of the different cultures that have been blended together here in Louisiana, and generally South Louisiana specifically. Talking about the population in the United States or in North America, we'll go back a little bit and take a look at this population map. I know this is you guys think back to when we discussed population grids. There are three population pyramids. There are three different times I want you to take a look at. And this shows when the United States, when we had our largest segment of our population, the baby boomers. If you go back to the 1950s, you'll see that this represents the baby boomers. The baby boomers were not yet born in 1900, but in the 1950s, we see that these two represent the baby boomers. This percent, so at this time, they made up approximately combined 11, maybe we go with both of these years, probably up to 20% of the population. And the same thing in the year 2000, the baby boomers are still the largest segment of our population, even going on today. So when you think about your grandparents, maybe great-grandparents, these are the baby boomers. And what this is just illustrating again, or just going back to, is that during our history, in 1900s to 20th century, we did not have a lot of immigration around World War II. And that was the majority of our population right after the time immediately following World War II was by the baby boomers, by soldiers returning home from war, people having children. They'd been gone for any number of years, 4, 5, 6 years in some cases, fighting a war in Europe. Came back, soldiers came back, started families. And so immediately following this, we saw this explosive growth in our population, which has been referred to as the baby boom. Also, though, because of World War II, and because of the fact that we were involved in a global war, there was restrictions in immigration. So we saw the United States cutting back in our immigration policies. Now, talking about the first people, these next two graphics illustrate, or these next two pictures kind of illustrate, we're taking a look at the first people to come to the United States, the first people, or North America. The first people to come from the United States came thousands of years ago, maybe up to, I think, 12 to 15,000 years ago, or what some scientists are estimating. And it's just from, they can tell by the different fossils and things that they found. And what this first map will show us is that it's generally accepted that human life began in Africa. So what this map illustrates is where the traffic of early man. So early man from Africa through Europe, from Europe to Asia, and from Asia, at once upon a time there was a land bridge. So there was once upon a time during the last water age, or when the water was actually lower, or during the last ice age, this part was either frozen or that the water was lower. So the United States, the part that we now call the United States and Russia, Alaska, and Asia touched. So that is how the first people got here over 15,000 years ago. And you can see they came down from in about approximately 3,000 years. They came down from the northern Alaska area down into the United States, into Central America. This other illustration below also says that there's a new theory that also shows that early man also was able to come from certain parts of Africa to South America. So archaeological evidence suggests that North America's first inhabitants came from Central America and Asia thousands of years ago, once again. And today, the descendants of these people are called the Native Americans. And once again, these two pictures just illustrate the early man's travels, or the time frame and the pathway that early man took to get to the United States, or to what we today call North America. Now, during the 1400s, this is what we're more familiar with European immigration started occurring in North America. In the 1400s, we started seeing guys like Amerigo Vespucci come, Christopher Columbus. This is the early European explorers. Also, the Spanish conquistadors landed in Central and South America around this time. Also, following these guys, the Puritans and Pilgrims came, escaping religious persecution in Europe. Also, people coming from Europe just looking for just to start a new life. So the majority, and because of these were our early explorers, or the early immigrants in the 1400s, the majority of the United States population now, or the majority of the population of North America now, is of European descent. And when we talk about some of the different pull factors that pull people to the United States or to North America over that time, political and religious freedom, like I mentioned earlier, better economic opportunities, the ability to be able to start a new life and to be able to come to a land of opportunity, wars, natural disasters, famines in Europe during that time. And also during this time, we saw the first African immigrants come to the United States. They came to North America as slaves during migration around this time in the 1400s. Now, early the United States and Canada were agricultural societies, but we eventually made the shift to become industrial societies, and this led to urbanization. So today, and let's kind of go back a little bit. This picture represents what the United States was, the United States and Canada, how we were the first years of our existence, or earlier parts of the United States and Canada. We were agricultural societies. Because of urbanization, this is what we have become. Now, today, most of the people in the United States and Canada, 80% in the United States and 60% in Canada, either live in cities like this or in suburbs, kind of like Gonzales. Gonzales is kind of tricky. Gonzales is probably a rural area. Prairieville is probably considered more of a suburb than Gonzales. But 80% of the people in the United States live in cities like these, or in suburbs, similar to, let's say, a Mandeville or a Prairieville. So when we talk about the shifting from an agricultural society to an industrial society, there were some certain inventions or certain things that made that occur in the United States. It was certain inventions that made that possible. The first was the railroad. Because of the railroad, people were able to travel vast distances in a relatively short period of time. Now, if you think about us today, we do not think railroads go quickly. We can get to our cars. We have automobiles. We have a lot of other methods that we would take besides the railroad. But early man, they either had to go by horses. And when I say early man, I don't just mean, a few thousand years ago. I mean, a couple of 100 years ago. Either you went on horse or you walked. So if you take those two options, either walking or on horse, railroad looks pretty strong. Railroad looks pretty quickly. So the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in the late 1800s made the transport of both goods and people from rural areas to urban areas much easier. And what the Transcontinental Railroad was, it was just a railroad, the first railroad system that went across the country. It did not necessarily stretch across the entire country, but most of the United States at that point in time. So people were able to travel from one part of the country to another within a matter of days instead of a matter of weeks or months in some cases. Also, the assembly line. The introduction of the assembly line. This picture shows what an early assembly line or an early factory assembly line looked like. And the introduction of the assembly line in the early 1900s, it started leading to the mass production of many goods, people. Also, though, the assembly line was used to lower the prices of certain things. So instead of it taking, we mentioned this previously, a day or 3 days to have something built, to build a car. With the assembly line, a car could be built within a matter of hours. This is important because what it did, everything on assembly line, it lowered the costs of it. So instead of, it took automobiles from being something that very few people could afford to something that the average person could afford. And that led us to the next development, which was the interstate highway system, which we think of today as the interstate. You think about Highway 10, they going from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. This is where we go most of the times when we travel. The construction of the interstate highway system began in the 1950s. It was possible, though, because of everyone having an automobile, right? Because automobiles were affordable. But because of this in the 1950s, it led to even greater mobility. It made it easier for people and goods to be transported from one place to another. Also, though, for military supplies, and that is initially what the military was. That is the primary purpose of the military, actually. That is the primary purpose of the interstate, which is to make it possible to transport military goods and services. So, getting back to it, the construction of the interstate highway system began in the U.S. in the 1950s and led to greater mobility of citizens. It facilitates private and commercial transportation, as well as providing key ground transportation routes for military supplies and troop developments in an emergency. All right, this is the end. Make sure you highlight the parts that we have in class, highlight the homework learning targets, and answer the questions in bold and complete sentences. I'll be checking for it in class. Have a good evening.